Welcome back to the Ashes debrief. It's not going to come as a surprise, but England have lost this test match. They've lost the series 4-1. I've got Stephan, Shemilt and Jonathan Agnew alongside me. Open question to start, fellas. What happened?
Well, it's funny, we've been talking about where it all went wrong to start with, and people were a bit surprised when I said July the 24th.
Yes, I am still confused because you haven't told me why.
July the 24th was the day that the press release came announcing the schedule for the tour from Cricket Australia, and I looked at it and I went ballistic. Because there's no hindsight here. Stephan will say the same thing. We've been saying for months that this is not a good schedule. This is not a schedule to win the Ashes. And that was the day the schedule was announced. I looked at it, I remember going on the radio, Test match special, and being quite cross. Because you cannot seriously come to Australia and what a lesson these fellas have learnt here. You cannot come to Australia on the back of that sort of preparation. I know it sounds boring, I know we banged on about it for weeks, but the story hasn't changed. That is the story.
Stephan, preparation a problem for you?
I was willing to give England the benefit of the doubt on the basis that the preparation that they'd used for previous overseas tours had worked. This was their 6th trip under McCullum and Stokes. On the previous 5, they'd won the first test match. In all of them, operating a very similar method. The problem for me came at Lilac Hill when that was so different. The game that they played against the Lions was so different to what they encountered at Optus Stadium. Completely different pitch, slow and low compared to the bounce of the Optus, and just a completely different atmosphere as well. It was so low key. They had the performance analyst in his whites acting as the sub-fielder. There was music coming from the dressing rooms for the entire 3 days. At one point, the scoreboard malfunctioned. It had Mark Wood batting on about 30 not out when he was in hospital having a scan on his hamstring.
Right.
It was just a very low-key way to build up to an Ashes test. If England had played a first-class game against the England Lions at a proper ground, and that's not to say anything against Lilac Hill, it's lovely, but if they played that game at the Wacker, a first-class game against the England Lions, that would have been much more suitable preparation. They didn't, and then they were just caught cold in Perth. I think after 4 sessions in Perth, lunch on the second day when they were 100 runs ahead, 1 wicket down in their second innings, we all thought they've got Australia where they want them. 2 sessions later, the game was lost, and realistically, the Ashes were lost as well.
Discipline for me too, Alex, on and off the field. There's been lots of stories about stuff off the field. We all know about Noosa and what happened there. This has been a very loose team environment, and you cannot, if you're ill-disciplined off the field, you're all disciplined on it. You can't suddenly switch on from that sort of vibe. And I remember that from my playing days. You know, it sounds very old-fashioned to, dress smart, play smart. It sounds very old-fashioned, but actually, you know what I mean? Yeah. If you're going to be loose and messing around and whatever they're doing off the field, you're not going to switch on. And you see how Australia have been. They're just relentless. That is how you win Test cricket. You are disciplined, bat, ball, and off the field as well. Your environment is tight and it's disciplined, and England has not been.
So Ben Stokes came out at the end of play and said, it's time for some honest truths. What are the honest truths coming out of this Ashes series?
I think it's interesting what Stokes is saying there, because the other point he's been making, that if you sort of split the Stokes-McCullum era into 2 halves, they started really well up to the end of the last Ashes at home, and then since then they've been losing as often as they've won. And it is with 2 different sets of players. Think about the team that first played for Stokes and McCullum. Anderson, Broad, Wokes, Moeen Ali came back, Johnny Bairstow.
Moeen Ali, what a throwback.
Exactly.
There you go.
Jack Leach was around the team as well. Even Ollie Robinson, who was eventually discarded. But the way that England wanted to play, they refreshed a group of experienced Test cricketers who'd had some success at that level, but they were playing poorly, and they refreshed them and they got them playing in a certain way, and they reinvigorated them. When the time came to refresh that team, naturally some of the players were moved on through age and drops in form and all those sorts of things. They picked younger players that I think Stokes has looked around at in this series and got, I'm not sure I've backed the right horses, or at least if Stokes says we've got the right squad, they just haven't had the experience to make good decisions in the key moments. Think about shots that Harry Brook has played, or that Jamie Smith has played here, or Will Jacks. You're closing your eyes, Al. You were on commentary when Will Jacks...
I can't do it anymore.
No.
Yeah, so I do think that is a factor in the way that England have collapsed on this tour, in that England backed certain players that they thought were going to stand up to a tour of Australia, on the field and off the field. And when you're talking about Agger's a looseness around the entire setup, England were caught cold, not just on the field, but with everything that goes with an Australian tour off the field as well. Think of the things that we've gone through during this tour. England followed to golf courses, to the aquarium, followed through the airport. They were pictured not wearing helmets on their e-scooters. All of those things.
To which the Australians have done as well, by the way, but didn't make the papers.
No, but all of it. And you've been coming here for so long, Aggers, that you know that is the environment that England teams in this country are walking into. And they were caught cold off the field as much as they were on it.
Which is surprising. They have to listen to people. You know, you've got Darren Lehman, former Australian coach, coaching at Northamptonshire. No one spoke to him. Michael Vaughan, who works with us, who's been working here for years. Ashes winner. Yeah. No one has spoken to him about what to expect or what to, none of that. And that's just, in fact, it's been quite the opposite. Or you has-beens. You don't know what you're talking. All that sort of stuff. No, I don't think I was listed as a has-been. I'm quite offended, actually. Maybe, hey, I'm just trendy. That's all it is. I'm not a has-been yet. Flexibility. I know we talk about discipline, and therefore kind of flexibility sounds a bit like, there's two different things. Actually, flexibility in terms of dealing with individuals. That's another thing that I don't think, looking in at the squad, I don't think that's happened either. You're either all in or you're not in. And that works for some people. It works for Stokes. It works for McCullum. It's the way they play their cricket. It's the way they live their lives. Ollie Pope's not one of those, I don't think. Jamie Smith doesn't look to be one of those. I think Baz Ball, we'll call it that, has been bad for Harry Brook. I don't think he's got any responsibility whatsoever, the way he's batted. Ben Duckett off the field. There's all these things you look at, but I think individuals need to be treated differently. A team is a team, of course it is, but a team is comprised of 11 individuals, and the skill of a manager, the skill of a coach, is bringing those 11 different people together in their own 11 different ways and forming a strong team. And I don't think that environment exists in that England camp.
It feels like there's been zero accountability for whether you can't bowl the ball in the right area or you don't listen to the captain, whether you play a horrific shot, whether your off-field behaviours are inappropriate. It doesn't feel like there's been any accountability over the last year in particular. Do you think this Ashes wake-up call and part of those home truths and honest truths is going to be having some accountability?
I do agree with that, because Ben Stokes actually threw his players under a bus twice. Stuff about no room for weak players in my team. And then the stuff he said today about we played 3 out of 5 cricket, people making bad decisions. Well, yes, but what are you saying actually when they make those bad decisions? Are they coming off and saying, "Oh, bad luck, mate, well tried, you ran towards danger there"?
Well, you might do during the series, but now's the time to actually have.
Well, I think that's the other point as well about when there was experienced players in the team and now they're not. How many of those players in the current England dressing room feel like they can stand up and say something back to Stokes or McCullum, because they're two really big characters. And so when you're talking about accountability, if everyone's thinking in the same way, well, there is no accountability. Groupthink is the sort of term that we've used about this England dressing room of, run towards the danger and put pressure back onto the opposition and take the game on and all those sorts of things. I think they're slogans. Do you know what you hear? Sometimes you see someone's got something on their kitchen.
We used to have them printed up on the back of the toilets in the dressing room and in places.
Yeah, soaking up pressure is so much, that's so much more sensible a way of playing, the running towards, soak up some pressure for a while. You don't see England doing that. Australia do it, good teams do it. You haven't got to be on that front foot all the time.
So why can't England be more patient?
I do think we should make the point that when Stokes and McCullum took over, the cricket they played
I agree with that.
Was exhilarating, and it was fun to watch.
It was necessary as well.
It was. England had won only 1 in 17. Stokes and McCullum took over. They won 10 out of their next 11, playing some thrilling cricket. They won in Pakistan. They won some home series that they just weren't doing before. But again, Ben Stokes has said it in the aftermath of this defeat in Perth. Teams have worked them out. And that's what happens in all professional sport, not just in cricket, in all professional sport. If someone finds a method that is working, you have to expect your opposition to go away, look at it, and try and counter that method. And England haven't worked out that teams have worked them out.
Yeah, I think they might have just done that in this series, to be fair. Aggers, Darren in Lincolnshire wants to know, should Key and McCullum be allowed to continue? So Baz firmly believes his method is the correct method. If he continues, should he continue? And also, will he change?
Well, this is a really interesting thing. So I've interviewed him this afternoon, obviously, and those of us who've been dealing with it, I worked with Brendon years ago, so you kind of get a feel for the fella. the way, I mean, he is Brendon McCullum. He batted like that. He coaches like that. He's a very free-spirited fella, very easygoing, very laid back. I wouldn't like to cross him, but he's essentially that sort of laid back fellow who has his own style. And I asked him directly, I said, are you the sort of person who's going to change what you believe in order to keep your job, basically? And he said to me, you know the answer to that. So it was very, well, I didn't think that was yes. However, you can alter. He was on about also in the same interview talking about you learn from things, you alter the way you do things. So I think if he's essentially allowed to keep the sort of core elements of what he believes in, which is empowering players, trusting players to take some responsibility of themselves, those sort of core things, but yet he has to be more open to the accessibility stuff that I was talking about. Not putting the pressure on players just to go out there and go harder when they're under pressure. That's not how you win test matches. You win test matches, as I said, by soaking up pressure, and then you come good again. Things like that. If he accepts that is the way that successful teams play, and the difference, and the discipline again, the difference with Australia and England has been so immense. He'll have seen it. If he accepts that, then I think that he can carry on. The thing for me is that there has to be somebody above him, if he makes this obligation to change the approach to an extent, who's going to make sure that it happens. If it's just somebody who's his mate, who says, oh, keep going, Baz, this is all terrific, and nothing has changed, that's not good enough. Things do have to change. There's a lot of people spent a life savings coming out here and watching this, and they are angry. I know you've seen some of these punters as well who've come. They're cross, they're angry, and they're absolutely right to be. They expect better than what's happened here, and England have to produce better. They are all responsible for what's happened here.
12 months before Brendon McCullum became England coach, he was with Kolkata Knight Riders in the Indian Premier League. And he gave an interview where he said, there's something I live my life by, was a quote, if you can't change a man, change the man. Which means, if someone won't change, you move them aside. And now we're going to find out if Brendon McCullum can change or if he should be moved on. And only Brendon McCullum is able to answer that.
Is he going to remember himself saying that?
Well, that is what we're about to find out. And what I find about this whole situation, that is if Brendon McCullum and Rob Key as well as the director of cricket, if they are being given the chance to keep their jobs, but they have to show that they are going to change the England setup, what does that mean? So broad. Does it mean play fewer rounds of golf, spend more time in the nets, get specialist coaches in, because we know that the bowling coach has changed, the fast bowling consultant has changed 3 times. Is that what that means?
Well, it means...
Because I don't think anyone knows.
They've got to drink less or drink less in public.
Well, that's another thing. How long does it take? How long do they get given?
There's loads that has to change. But they've got to play more cricket. They've got to play more games of cricket. They've got to prepare differently for tours. I mean, you can just go on and on and on. These young players, Shoaib Bashir, I mean, Jacob Bethel in a way has risen above this, but they've got to learn how to play cricket.
How long does that take, though? Well, they've got a T20 World Cup in a month. The next home test match in 5 months.
In Bashir's case, a couple of years, playing solid county cricket, and then he comes back with a game.
So,
there's
always a fallout guy. There has to be. There always is. There has been in the past. There always is. Is this the time there isn't a fallout man?
It might be. It might be that that's the case. But it all depends to me. If Brendon McCullum can be told what to do by a bloke in a suit who hasn't played professional cricket, told that this is the way you have to change, and then Rob Key's going to make sure that happens. Well, if he accepts that, A, I'll be surprised, but B, you would need somebody in that Rob Key position to make sure that he sticks to that. And that's the area for me. I'm not sure, because I think you've got 3 very similar people. In Stokes, McCullum and Key, you've got 3 very similar individuals, and not the boss who's going to say, hang on a minute, this isn't right. You said you're going to do this, it's not happening, do it. I think they need somebody with more authority and a more authoritarian person, not someone who goes back to the old days, not somebody who has you running around naughty boy nets or whatever it is, but someone who if McCullum signs up for this, make sure that he sticks to it.
I think of the 3 people you just mentioned there, Aggers, Stokes, McCullum, Key, the one with most power comfortably is Ben Stokes.
Yes.
I would argue he's even the most powerful person in English cricket, because you can change a coach, you can change a director of cricket, you can get a new chief executive, you can get a new chairman. You cannot get another Ben Stokes.
Not as captain.
Certainly not.
Yeah.
And if Ben Stokes is still the right man to be England captain, he still wants to do it, fitness permitting. And just downstairs in a press conference, Ben Stokes was said, if I am asked my opinion, I will say that Brendon McCullum should be in charge. Now, he's not going so far as to say, if he's not in charge, I won't be captain, but Ben Stokes clearly has a lot of influence in English cricket. And Stokes has 18 test matches, I reckon, left as an England cricketer. His contract goes through to the end of the next Ashes, and that's how many matches there are between now and the 5th test at the Oval. He will be laser focused on ending his career, ending his tenure as captain, holding that tiny trophy.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about from now on in.
Okay, just quickly before we wrap up the final Ashes debrief of 2025/2026, that's actually quite sad. What are your feelings when you leave this Ashes tour? For me, it's just disappointment. So
Yeah, frustration, disappointment. You know, they've broken the crowd numbers aggregate for an Ashes series because people thought it was going to be so good. Australians too. I was here a month before the first test match. Australians, I know, were so excited about it. They thought it was going to be a really fantastic tournament. So many people have come here believing that England would win. So for me, intense disappointment. It should have been better than this.
Disappointment in the way that England have played, but privileged to have seen it all because, like you say, 850,000 people have come through the gates over the past 7 weeks over those 5 test matches, and think of what we've seen.
Yeah.
At Perth, Zach Crawley nicking off in the first over, Travis Head's 100,
Yep.
Joe Root's 100 at Brisbane was a wonderful moment. Snicko controversy in Adelaide,
Snicko.
2-day test match in Melbourne. I'll never forget the Barmy Army tipping their hats in the Shane Warne tribute. And then here this week, the SCG, for my money, Sydney, the best city in Australia and the best cricket ground. It's been a privilege to see.
And the
it all.
emergence of Jacob Bethel.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. Some positives at the end of the tour. Stephan, Aggers, thank you very much. Don't forget I want to say highlights, but I'm going to call them low lights, are on the iPlayer at 5 p.m. I would say we'll be back, but who knows if we ever will be. So thank you very much for following along. See you later.